The Alchemy of Adversity, Transforming Pain into Purpose. Have you ever stood at the edge of your own breaking point and wondered what lies beyond? That mysterious space where shattered pieces begin to reform into something entirely new? I've spent years studying resilience, but it wasn't until my recent conversation with Dr. Rhoda Chunky Carter that I truly understood its essence. Chunky isn't just a survivor, she's an alchemist, a woman who has taken the lead mercury and base metals of trauma and transmuted them into pure gold. Her work supporting domestic violence survivors, homeless youth, LGBTQ plus communities, and mental health initiatives has quite literally saved lives. But what makes her extraordinary isn't just what she's overcome, it's how she's transformed that overcoming into a blueprint for others. When we first sat down together, I expected stories of endurance. What I received instead was a masterclass in metamorphosis. The parts of ourselves we're taught to hide, she told me, leaning forward with an intensity that made me instinctively lean in too, often become our greatest sources of strength. She paused, letting that sink in, but only if we have the courage to reclaim them. That statement hit me like lightning. How many of us walk around with fragmented identities, hiding pieces of ourselves, our cultural heritage, our scars, our truths, because we've been taught they make others uncomfortable? Chunky described living between worlds, balancing multicultural roots with American norms as a profound gift rather than a burden. This duality that many would view as a disadvantage, she had alchemized into her superpower. It gave her perspective, adaptability, empathy that runs bone deep. I couldn't help but laugh when she said, I used to think I needed to pick a side, be more of this, less of that. Now I realize the magic was always in the hyphen, that space between identities where something entirely new is born. For those of us who felt caught between worlds, too black for white spaces, too educated for some communities, too spiritual for secular settings, too questioning for religious ones, her words offer liberation. The invitation isn't to choose, it's to embrace the complexity and recognize that our multifaceted identities aren't contradictions, they're constellations. Consider the remarkable work of Black Women's Blueprint in New York. When I shared their story with Chunky, her eyes lit up with recognition. Here was an organization led by Black women survivors who refused to fragment themselves for the comfort of mainstream feminist movements that had long neglected their unique challenges at the intersection of race and gender. Instead of shrinking, these women expanded. They created healing circles rooted in African diasporic traditions, honoring ancestral wisdom while addressing contemporary trauma. They launched campaigns for policy reform that recognize the specific ways violence impacts Black women's bodies and communities. They built direct support services that didn't force survivors to leave their cultural identities at the door to receive help. Their founder, Farah Tanis, saw the gaps in survivor care, specific to Black women's experiences with abuse, and filled them with solutions that honored cultural context. The result? They've influenced national conversations on sexual assault against Black women, built safe spaces for healing outside dominant paradigms, and empowered thousands through education programs that don't require women to fragment themselves to heal. This, Chunky said when I finished sharing their story, is exactly what happens when we refuse to be reduced by our pain, when we insist on bringing our whole selves, our wounds, our wisdom, our cultural inheritance to our healing and our service. But let's be honest, reclaiming your voice after trauma isn't a straight path. It's more like a spiral staircase. Sometimes you feel like you're covering the same ground just at a different level. Chunky knows this intimately. As a survivor of violence and hardship, she had to fight to reclaim her voice, her identity, her sense of purpose. What she discovered, what she shared with me with such vulnerable power, is that surviving trauma doesn't define your limits. It can actually catalyze transformation. The question isn't whether you can heal, she said, her voice both gentle and firm. The question is whether you're willing to believe healing is possible for you. That shift from seeing yourself as permanently damaged to recognizing your capacity for renewal changes everything. It's like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, making the piece more beautiful, more valuable because of its brokenness. Our wounds, when acknowledged and tended with care, become the golden seams that make us uniquely powerful. The Loveland Foundation embodies this principle beautifully. Founded by Rachel Cargle in response to barriers faced by Black women seeking therapy, this organization provides financial assistance for therapy sessions specifically for Black women and girls nationwide. They partner with culturally competent therapists who understand that healing doesn't happen in a vacuum, it happens in context. Since 2018, they've raised over $5 million, supporting thousands of individuals' journeys toward emotional healing. What began as a birthday fundraiser has evolved into a movement that's redefining what holistic support looks like for marginalized groups navigating trauma. When I shared this with Chunky, she nodded knowingly. This is what becomes possible, she said, when we honor our wounds instead of hiding them, when we seek healing instead of numbing, when we transform our pain into purpose. Which brings me to perhaps the most powerful insight from our conversation. True leadership is found in serving others. After reclaiming her own voice and identity, Chunky didn't stop there. She channeled her healing energy outward, supporting survivors of domestic violence, homeless youth, LGBTQ advocacy, mental health awareness. She demonstrated how individual healing can ripple outward to uplift entire communities. The most profound healing, she told me, her eyes shining with conviction, often happens when we extend a hand to someone else who's still in the darkness we've just emerged from. This isn't about martyrdom or self sacrifice. It's not about putting on the superwoman cape that so many of us have worn until exhaustion. It's about recognizing that our stories, especially our stories of overcoming, contain medicine that others need. Consider Youth Advocate Programs, an organization operating across the U.S. that provides alternatives to incarceration programs focused on empowering at risk youth. Many participants come from backgrounds marked by poverty, abuse, or neglect, environments similar to what Chunky experienced as a teen runaway. YAP employs neighborhood based advocates who build deep relationships with youth and families while connecting them with educational opportunities, counseling services, and life skills training, all rooted in respect and cultural competence. Their approach centers on hope rather than punishment, meeting kids where they are instead of forcing conformity. Thousands have avoided incarceration or homelessness due to YAP's intervention strategies. What began over 40 years ago, when its leaders saw traditional systems failing children labeled high risk, has become a nationally recognized model replicated globally. Their alumni include educators and community leaders giving back just as they were supported. This is the beautiful cycle of healing. When we receive support in our darkest moments, we become capable of offering that same light to others. But here's what's crucial to understand, and what Chunky emphasized repeatedly in our conversation: serving others from a place of depletion isn't sustainable. True service flows from abundance, not scarcity, from wholeness, not fragmentation. You cannot pour from an empty cup, as the saying goes. But I take it further. You cannot heal others from an unhealed heart. So, what does this mean for you sitting here right now? How do you begin this alchemical process of transforming your pain into purpose? Start by identifying one area where you feel silenced or constrained, whether due to culture, trauma, or circumstance, and take one small step today toward reclaiming your voice there. That could mean reaching out for help or support you put off seeking. Or if you're already standing strong, offering encouragement or resources so someone else can begin their own journey back home to themselves. The world doesn't need more people who've learned to survive at the cost of their softness. It needs more alchemists, people who've learned to transform their lead into gold, their pain into purpose, their fragmentation into wholeness. I challenge you to stop asking, how do I endure this pain? And start asking, how might this pain be transformed? What wisdom lies within it? Who might be healed if I have the courage to share it? Because the truth is, your wounds are not just yours. They're portals to connection, they're bridges to understanding. They're the very places where your unique medicine grows. In the words of the great Audre Lorde, when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. Dare to be powerful today. Dare to reclaim the parts of yourself you've been taught to hide. Dare to believe that your brokenness might be precisely what the world needs. Because when we transform our pain into purpose, we don't just heal ourselves, we help heal the world.